What if the loneliest sound in the universe was a human voice? Long after Earth had stopped expecting answers from the stars, a signal arrived, soft, distant, familiar. It whispered from the Andromeda galaxy, carrying the rhythm of something long forgotten, or perhaps someone. This is a story of a journey beyond light, into memory, mystery, and the quiet places where humanity echoes through time. Settle in, close your eyes, and let the stars tell you what we once lost, and what we might still find. In the vast, endless quiet of deep space, Earth had long grown used to the silence. For decades, its great listening towers scanned the stars, waiting, wondering, and dreaming. They listened not for danger, but for connection. A whisper, a word, a reminder that we were not alone. And then one evening, just before the edge of night, a pulse, faint, rhythmic, deliberate, hidden beneath waves of cosmic noise, was something no one had heard before. It wasn't a random burst of static. It wasn't the language of stars or the hum of dying suns. It was something far more familiar, a pattern simple. Human. It sounded like a voice. Not a single word, but a melody. Almost like someone, somewhere, was humming in the dark. No one on Earth could explain it, but everyone felt it, as though a long-lost sibling had spoken from across the ocean of time. The signal came from far beyond the Milky Way, from the Andromeda galaxy, a place no human had ever touched, at least not in recorded history. And so a question echoed across Earth's skies. Was this a call from something new, or someone we left behind? In the quiet hum of control rooms, in the rustling pages of ancient mission logs, in the silent, wide eyes of those who watched the stars, the decision was made that we would go, not with weapons, not with fear, but with curiosity, and the hope of remembering something we had forgotten. And in that moment, Earth wasn't just listening anymore. It was answering. The voice from Andromeda did not fade. It pulsed, patient and steady, like a heartbeat echoing across galaxies. On Earth, the world changed quietly, not with headlines or fireworks, but with whispered conversations between scientists, diplomats, and dreamers. They knew the signal was not noise. It was a message, or perhaps a memory. And so, a mission was born. Not to conquer, not to claim, but to understand. A ship was prepared, forged in low orbit, cradled by Earth's gravity like a leaf on still water. They called it the Solace Voyager. It was built not just with steel and circuitry, but with longing, with wonder, with the collective hope of a planet ready to listen again. The crew was chosen with care, not for strength alone, but for wisdom. A historian who knew the silence of forgotten civilizations, a linguist who could find stories and vibrations, an exobiologist, a stargazer, an engineer, and a captain whose eyes had watched nebulae bloom like flowers across black skies. They trained not only for the unknown, but for the weight of discovery, for what it would mean to face something human. But change. As launch day neared, the Earth grew still. Children looked up with wonder. Elders wept without knowing why. Some whispered prayers, others only watched the stars. Then, on a morning as pale as silver, the engines of the Solace Voyager came to life. No ceremony, no countdown, just a slow lift from the cradle of Earth, and the long, slow turning toward the stars. A blue planet grew smaller behind them, and ahead, the voice waited, still humming, still calling. They didn't know what they would find, but they carried every voice of Earth with them, bound for a place no human had seen for 1,000 lifetimes. The mission had begun, and silence was no longer alone. Space is not loud. It does not roar, or rush, or rumble. It drifts, and it waits, as the Solace Voyager slipped past the edge of the solar system. The noise of Earth, the chatter, the cities, the storm of signals fell away, leaving only the soft pulse of the ship and the deeper quiet of the stars. The journey to Andromeda would not be short. It would stretch across time itself, through folded space and engineered corridors of light. The crew entered cryosleep in intervals, each awakening like surfacing from a dream, to check the systems, recalibrate the path, and speak into their journals. They spoke not just of science, but of memories. The captain, in the silence of the observation deck, watched the stars slide by like ancient spirits, and thought of his daughter's drawings on the wall, of blue crayon suns and paper rocket ships. The linguist wrote poetry about sound she could no longer hear: the ocean, laughter, the way wind rustled through trees back home. The historian listened to the signal again and again, eyes closed, imagining the people who might be behind it, what they might remember, what they might have forgotten. Outside, space stretched forever, vast fields of starlight, nebulae blooming like ink in water, and the soft breath of comets weaving past their hole. Inside, the crew dreamed, and when they awoke, they dreamed again. This was not a race. This was a return. And still, beyond the black curtain of stars, the signal hummed on, a single, persistent echo, like a lighthouse waiting across an ocean of night. And so they traveled, not to reach a destination, but to find a part of humanity that had wandered too far from home. The stars of Andromeda glowed like embers behind a veil of ancient dust, a new galaxy, full of forgotten light. The crew watched in silence as their maps came to life, constellations Earth had never known. And among them, one planet turned slowly, beneath a pale amber sun. It was not the source of the signal. It was the signal. The closer they drifted, the clearer the frequency became, not just a sound, but a rhythm embedded in the world itself. The planet pulsed with memory. Good clouds moved like slow breath across oceans of deep green. Land masses curled, like fingerprints, familiar and foreign all at once. They called it EO7, a name pulled from mythology. And yet it felt like the planet had always had a name of its own. Something older, something waiting. Their descent was slow, not from fear, but reverence. Like entering a cathedral made of sky and silence. Forests stretched out in every direction, thick with blue-leafed trees that shimmered in the wind. Mountains curved upward like the ribs of a sleeping giant, and lakes reflected the sky so perfectly it was hard to know where heaven ended and the world began. But it was not just nature that greeted them. Ruins ancient, quiet, breathing with the years stood half buried in moss. Stone pathways etched with symbols, structures that rose like memory from the earth, crafted not by aliens, but by hands once human. The crew walked among them without speaking. No footprints in the soil, no signs of life, just the faintest whisper in the wind. The signal, ever present, ever gentle, now woven into the very air. They had arrived at the forgotten world, not lost, not dead, but waiting. Their boots touched down in silence, on soil older than memory. EO7 welcomed them not with voices, but with echoes. The team moved carefully, as if every step might stir the past awake. Beneath the forest canopy, light filtered through violet leaves in soft, drifting shafts, painting the ground in quiet gold. The ruins were everywhere, carved stone, smoothed by time, spiral pillars bent with vines, archways leading into darkness. But this was no alien architecture. It was human, changed, yes, adapted, but unmistakably shaped by minds that once came from Earth. Symbols were etched into walls, curved and elegant, not just language, but art. Some were maps. Some looked like calendars. Others showed faces, long oval, thoughtful, like people watching from across time. They found a sundial-like structure that tracked not just the planet's sun, but 3 others they did not yet see aligned with the stars of Andromeda. The biologist studied plants growing through the cracks in stone. Many bore genetic markers of Earth flora, but twisted, rebalanced, as if the world itself had resculpted what was left behind. And yet, no voices called to them. No movement broke the stillness. It felt not abandoned, but paused. The historian placed a hand on the cold stone. "It's not a grave," she said in her journal. "It's a memory made solid." That night, under a lavender sky, the team camped near a great circular monument open to the heavens, its center carved with a symbol they couldn't yet read. But as they slept, the signal returned, louder now, closer, not from the sky, but from beneath the ground. Something was still here, watching, waiting, and they had just touched the surface. Morning came softly on EO7. Mist curled through the trees like breath. and the air hummed faintly, not just with wind or life, but with presence. The crew followed the signal into the forest. Their instruments flickered. The sound wasn't just louder, it was layered, harmonic, almost intentional. And then, in a clearing that had waited lifetimes to be found, they saw them, not creatures, not strangers, but people, human yet not. They stood tall, their bodies shaped by a world unshared with earth, skin iridescent in the sunlight, eyes silvered, deep with knowing. They wore garments woven from living fibers, flowing like water and wind, but it was their stillness that spoke loudest. They did not speak, they resonated. The signal was them, not a broadcast, not a beacon, but a form of presence, a thought, and the crew felt it, not in their ears, but in their chest. A deep vibration, not words, but meanings, curiosity, caution, recognition, pain. These were not aliens. They were descendants of humans. A lost colony, long thought dead, long adapted, long changed. They had built a new life on Eos 7. A culture evolved not just biologically, but spiritually, emotionally. They remembered Earth not as history, but as myth, a beginning wrapped in shadow. And now, they were faced with those who had returned, from the other side of the stars, from the past, from a home that had forgotten them. The air between the two groups trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of something ancient and unresolved. The crew had come to understand, but first, they would have to listen. The meeting did not begin with words. There were no handshakes, no greetings, only the quiet reverberation of thought, deep, low, and layered with memory. The people of EO7 did not fear the crew, but they did not trust them. Their eyes silver and ancient held stories not written, but felt. The signal, once a mystery, was now a language, a resonance shared through light and tone, a symphony of shared emotion, and within it, there was grief, wounds left by time, by history half remembered and half buried. The historian among the crew pieced it together slowly, not from data, but from fragments of symbol and sensation. Once, long ago, Earth had tried to find this colony, a second expedition, a different mission, but something had gone wrong. What came was not peace, it was fear, demand, control. And when the storm of space cut communication, the colony was left, alone, again, abandoned, twice. The descendants never forgot. They had evolved not just to survive, but to remember. Now, Earth had returned a third time, and the question hung in the still air like dust in sunlight. Why? The crew brought no weapons, only questions, and listening, but still a divide remained. One carved not by malice, but by time. Some among the descendants wanted no more contact. Others, wondered what could be rebuilt. Even among the crew, there were fractures. Is this truly our home, or is it theirs now? Beneath a sky full of quiet stars, two branches of humanity stood facing each other, changed by galaxies, bound by origin, and uncertain of their future. And through it all, the signal pulsed not as a warning, but as a heartbeat. Old wounds had surfaced, and healing would take more than discovery. It would take trust. Beneath the forest, beyond the ruins, and deep within the bones of EO7, there was a chamber. The descendants called it the Hollow of Light, a place not built, but grown, formed from crystal and earth, from time and silence and intention. The crew was invited, not all, only three. The historian, the linguist, and the captain. They entered slowly, their footsteps muffled by the soft mineral glow. The walls shimmered with a light that pulsed in rhythm, like breath, like memory. It was not a library. There were no books, no screens. But as they stepped forward, the air around them changed. Sound began to form, not speech, but layered impressions. Like standing inside a dream someone else had lived. They saw not with eyes, but with understanding. The crash of the first colony ship, the struggle for shelter, children born under two moons, generations adapting to gravity, air, time. The moment the second expedition came, demanding, unkind, then gone. And after that, the silence, the long aching silence, and still, they endured through storm and mutation, through forgetting and remembering, They made a world, not Earth, not alien, but something in between. The memory chamber was not a vault of facts, it was a vessel of feelings, of truth wrapped in emotion, of sorrow, pride, and resilience, preserved in light. The historian wept, not from sadness, but from recognition. This was humanity, woven in a different thread. The captain stood silently, a single thought blooming. In his mind, we didn't just find them, we found ourselves. As they emerged from the chamber, the night sky above seemed different, not colder, not darker, but wider. Some truths cannot be written, they must be carried. And now, the crew carried them, not for Earth to control, but to remember. The silence that followed the chamber was not empty. It was full of meaning, full of weight, full of quiet choices waiting to be made. The crew gathered again, not in debate, but in reflection. They had come seeking a mystery. They found family, strange, distant, transformed, but family nonetheless. And now they stood at a crossroad, returned to Earth, to report, to explain, to possibly open doors that some here did not wish opened, or stay, and help rebuild what once was severed, to bridge to paths of evolution, without forcing them into one. Among the descendants there was no consensus either. Some wished to remain hidden, to preserve what they had become. Others, especially the young, felt something stir when they looked at the crew. A hunger not for Earth, but for connection, for context, for a larger story to belong to. The captain watched his team. Some longed for home, for oceans they could name, for families waiting on the other side of the stars. Others had fallen in love with this place, with its stillness, its language of light, its people who remembered more through silence than Earth ever had in noise. And so, a decision was made, not one voice, but many, braided together like strands of star thread. Part of the crew would return, to carry the truth, not as conquest, but as story. The rest would stay, to learn, to teach, to live not as visitors, but as a bridge between to homes one remembered, one rediscovered. There was no ceremony, only long embraces, quiet farewells, and a single crystal, given in parting a memory, encoded in light, to carry back to Earth. That is the solace Voyager prepared for its final course. The night above EO7 sparkled in stillness, and below, too, branches of humanity separated by galaxies had chosen not to merge, but to reach. The day of departure came quietly. There were no crowds, no speeches, just the soft hum of wind through violet trees, and the stillness of those who remained behind. The Solace Voyager stood once more on her launch legs, weathered by time, but steady. Those returning had changed, not in body, but in understanding. They had seen humanity's reflection cast across stars, not as a mirror, but as a prism. The descendants of EO7 stood nearby, silent as ever, but no longer strangers. Their signal no longer pulsed with mystery, but with memory, shared, respected, protected. The captain stepped aboard last. He looked once more at the trees, the sky, the people and the crew that chose to stay. A quiet nod, a farewell spoken, not with words, but with eyes that carried the weight of everything unspoken. As the ship rose into the upper air, EO7 grew small beneath them, a cradle of a forgotten future. Through the observation window, the stars stretched, wide once more. But now, the silence of space felt different. Not empty, not alone. In the hold, the crystal memory glowed faintly, a living record, a gift, a promise. When Earth would hear it someday, it would not be a warning. It would not be a claim. It would be a reminder that humanity is not bound to one world, or one way of being, that even across galaxies, through silence and time, we are still one story. And as the Solace Voyager turned toward home, the voice from Andromeda faded at last, not because it was silenced, but because it had been heard. And in the great sleeping dark of space, the stars watched on, ancient, patient, and bright.